Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Andrea. I am the Customer Experience Manager here at ProdPad, and with us today is Liz, our Director of Sales. So we're going to be doing a webinar about product management approaches. Webinar is going to last about 20 minutes or so for the entire talk, and then we're going to do a little Q&A. So please drop your questions in the questions tab. We will be answering them at the end. And with that said, Liz, on to you.
Hi, everybody. Okay, so as Andrew said, we're going to talk a little bit about product management approaches today. We're going to talk about whether the top-down approach is right, the bottom-up approach is right, or actually whether a blended approach of both is right. I think it's pretty obvious a blended approach is right, but we'll get there when we get there. So before I do that, what I want to really talk about is the difference between top-down and bottom-up. So when I talk about top-down, what I'm really talking about are the things that you hear from your senior leadership team or from the senior members of your product organization. So what is your company vision? What's your product vision? What objectives do you have as a company? What objectives do you have within your product? And what are the themes or the initiatives that you're working on? So this is big picture stuff. This is high level. It's not the kind of detail you can share with the development team, but it from within the organization. Now, of course, this should be informed by what you're hearing from the market. But when I talk about bottom up, what I'm talking about is what you actually hear from individuals in the market. So what kind of feedback are you getting? What ideas are you coming up with as far as changes to your product? What enhancements are you looking to make, or what new features are people asking for? And they don't always chime together. They're not always at the same level of detail. And that is really why I think you do need to consider both the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach and try and bring those together to create a roadmap that works for everybody. So before we look at what that blended approach looks like, let's get into that top-down in a little bit more detail. So we start off by talking about vision. And I think that everybody who's a product person knows that vision is really, really important. Vision is what you want to achieve with your product, what the long-term goal is. Think about if your product was perfect and it was everything you ever wanted it to be, what would it look like? That's really your vision. And I think we all know this guy. We're talking about Steve Jobs here, and something that he said was that if you are working on something exciting that you really care about, you don't have to be pushed. That vision will pull you along. And I think that's really fair. I think if you keep that vision in your eyesight and look out to the distance always with that vision in mind, it will certainly help you make the right decisions along the way and help you decide what belongs on your roadmap and what doesn't belong on your roadmap. Now, the next thing that we want to talk about when it comes to that top-down approach is what are our objectives. Objectives, you might think of as objectives or maybe even OKRs, but really what we're talking about are the big picture things that you want to work on and, of course, most importantly, measure to prove that your strategy is working. So think of your objectives as being guide rails, those things that stop you from varying too much along the path towards that vision. And objectives not only are something that helps you know what are the things that you want to achieve on the way towards your vision, but they also help you to measure progress. They're the kind of things that if you say, I want to be better at something, you should be able to measure whether you're improving it or not. They're the needles or the gauges that you want to move over to the right or turn up in order to prove that you really are making progress towards that vision. Now, the important thing about objectives is not only do they help you to know what are the right things to put on your roadmap, but they also help you to justify and explain your decisions along the way. One of the things that product managers find the most difficult is knowing where to say yes and where to say no. And I think we all know that as product managers, we have to say no or maybe not yet more often than we have to say yes. So having objectives helps you to do that. If you can point to your roadmap objectives and your product objectives and say the reason that we are planning to do this is because it helps us to improve revenue or user growth or user engagement, then that helps you to explain the decisions that you're making about your roadmap. Now, The other thing that we have to consider when we look at this top-down approach is the strategy. And really, strategy is explaining what you'll build or make or do or change or enhance or improve in order to achieve your vision. These are the concrete individual changes that you're going to do. And another way of thinking about this actually is that the roadmap is your strategy. If you've got a roadmap that defines what you're going to do, then that really is defining your strategy for you. Now, our own CEO, Jana, who of course is co-founder of Mind the Product as well, says that your roadmap is a prototype for your strategy. And what she really means by that is if you put together a roadmap that defines what you're going to do and why you're going to do it, you can use that as a prototype by putting that in front of your stakeholders, in front of your customers, showing them what your plans are, and then having your mind open and your ears open to be able to listen to feedback from that so that you can modify your strategy and improve it and iterate on it, and get to the point that you're happy with your strategy. Really, when you build your roadmap based on these objectives and these initiatives that you want to take on, you should be able to put that in front of people, listen to what they're saying, and improve upon it until you've got some really good concrete plans. But of course, your roadmap is not fixed. Now, what should that really look like? So if we again think about what the structure of the roadmap looks like, we're really talking about an explanation of strategy rather than explanation of exactly when and how things are going to be built. So again, we're really talking here about what and why, and we're going to talk in terms of rough prioritization. So we have these time horizons on our ideal roadmap of now, next, and later. And you can imagine that in the now column of your roadmap, you're really talking about things that you are working on now. So you understand them pretty well. The scope is very specific. They're pretty fixed. You've done a lot of work, a lot of discovery work. You've validated your ideas with the market by putting prototypes and ideas in front of them and got feedback. And so you have a pretty good idea of what the items in your now column look like. You might even be at the point where you've got enough confidence to give a date and say, this is something that we're working on. We know it really, really well. And we're predicting that we're hoping to get it done in the next quarter, for example. But what you're not going to do is perhaps put that it's 5 o'clock on the 21st of November, because things change and things need to adapt. Now, when we look at this next column, we do want to look into something that's a bit wider, a bit less detailed. We're still learning about things in the next column. We haven't started really working on them in development yet. We may be still doing some usability kind of testing and some prototype testing, and we're starting to learn a little bit more about what these items are until we bring them forward into the now column and actively start to develop them. Now, the things that are in your later column are likely to be quite aspirational. They're things that you want to do. You want to build that mobile app, or that you want to start heading into that new market. But at this point, it's pretty broad, it's pretty flexible. You don't really know exactly what that looks like. You're showing direction and intent rather than exact detail on what you're working on. Now, if we bring that together with the idea of having objectives and most importantly, themes or initiatives, what we end up with is a roadmap that looks something like this. We can see for each of these cards exactly what we're planning to build. We can see that we want to improve the inline checkout flow. We can see that in-app notifications and the audit log are really important. We can see what kind of objectives we have. We can see that we're looking to get more revenue or increase engagement, or maybe look at security. But again, at this point, we have an understanding of strategy and something that we can share as far as intent is concerned. But what we don't have is enough information to share this with a development team and have them have enough information to really start working on this in detail. Now, what that means is we've got to start looking at this kind of bottom-up approach. And that's where we start to look at the other side of the roadmap and start to think about what we're hearing from the market as far as individual details are concerned and how that ties in with the big themes that we've really decided we need to concentrate on. So when we start to look at that bottom-up approach, what do we really mean? Well, what we mean is the ideas that we have and the feedback. And I'm going to start talking first about ideas. Now, to me, ideas are the representation of a problem that needs to be solved and a solution to that problem. Now, quite often what we hear from our end users isn't necessarily the problem description. They'll ask for a blue button or they'll ask for a new drop down, but they don't necessarily tell us exactly what it is that we need to build in order to solve their problem. They just tell us what they think the solution might be. But we do need to speak to users in order to find out what these ideas should be. Now, the image on this slide I actually love. It was something that came from the Government Digital Services blog, where as a team they were looking at ways to improve public services and digital public services. And somebody within the team took a piece of A4 paper, tore a strip out the middle of it, stuck it onto the window and wrote users on it. And what they were saying was that they made the point that their end users in their particular situation were every man who walks in the street, every woman who walks in the street. It's the people who are passing by the window. And the point that they were making was that they need to get ideas from the people who are really using the system. Now that might come in directly from users, and that's where we'd get into feedback, but it also might come in via people who are working within your organization. That might be the product team who are speaking to users, it might be the sales team, marketing support, anyone really who interacts with users or customers are going to be the kind of people who will bring you ideas. And what you have to do over time is start to get to the point where you can filter those ideas. Now, that might be from what you get from your internal stakeholders, but it's important to not just have the details of what the idea is. It's important to also keep track of the actual feedback itself. I'm talking here about verbatim what people have actually said, what the feedback was, what they initially asked for. Maybe they did give you enough information to understand the problem that you're trying to solve. And there's a really important point here. What we want to do is separate ideas, which, as I say, are the description of the problem and the solution, from the initial feedback. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that feedback is really going to help you understand what your idea looks like. It's going to give you more and more context to understand the problem. It's also going to give you an idea of the scope of your problem. How many people does it affect? Are there a lot of people asking for this, or is it just one or two? Does it occur a lot? Does it occur every day, or is it occurring once on a Tuesday in June when it's sunny? Having the initial verbatim feedback from your end users and separating that out from the ideas, which are your internally facing description of what you're going to build, gives you the ability to have an objective point of view on what you're going to build, but also that background information to help you understand why you're building it. Now, the people who request the solution are not only the people who are giving you that information to validate what you want to build, but they're also potentially testers for you as time goes on. Once you get to the point that you've got prototypes in place or you've got ideas for what the designs might look like, then these initial people who gave you the feedback are the kind of people who are going to be interested to have a look at your suggested solution, give you feedback on the solution and help you refine it before you get to the point of release. Not only will they give you that feedback during that design point of view, but they're also going to help you when you actually release the feature to either be beta testers or maybe even just first adopters. These are the people who are going to drive adoption of this new feature once you actually deliver it. So let's think about the fact that at the moment that we've collected feedback from users, we've built up an idea, which is a description of the problem, but most importantly, the solution. What we want to also do is start to think about how that looks in a backlog. You're going to have lots and lots and lots of ideas. And what you want to do is review those ideas, validate them, look at how much feedback they've got, look at whether they fit in with those objectives and those themes that we put on the roadmap, and slowly but surely move them through a product management workflow. They'll start off as new ideas that you'll score for priority. You'll then get to the point that you can see which ideas are the highest priority. So you'll start to write user stories and put together designs and build specifications and so on. And you'll slowly but surely get to the point where there's just a few that trickle through that funnel and get down into development. Now, one of the things that I mentioned there was the idea of having priority scoring on your ideas. And that's where we'd certainly advocate the idea of scoring based on impact versus effort. Let me just explain this in a little bit more. Everybody out there has a different point of view on how to do priority scoring. There's lots of different methods out there. RICE is a very common one. As I said, there's a number of different kind of ways of doing weighted scoring and so on. But what you really want to have is something that's fairly simple, something that doesn't require a lot of input, a lot of decisions by committee, a lot of intricate scoring, which at the end of the day is only really as good as the information that gets input into that process. We'd certainly advocate a very simple scoring process where you look at an idea, and each of these dots in this example here represents an idea, and score that for impact versus effort. Now you can imagine on this diagram here, the ideas that we have in the top left quadrant are what we'd call quick wins. They are easy to deliver, i.e. they're low effort, but they're high impact, they're valuable to the business. Ideas that are bottom right are what we call a time sink. So these are ideas that look like they're going to take a lot of effort to deliver, but at the end of the day, they're not going to bring much value to the user. And at the end of the day, what we're all about is having the best outcomes for our users and for our customers. So by scoring impact versus effort, we can quite quickly see which are the ideas that we should be looking at first. Probably those quick wins, followed by the ones top right, which are more complicated but still be really valuable. And we really want to make sure that the time sinks are the things that we look at last, and probably not at all. Again, scoring in this way is helping you to understand which ideas to say yes to straight away and which ideas to push back on, and it gives you an objective way to speak to your team members and tell them why you've made the decisions you have. Now, something we get asked quite a lot is, how do we score impact and effort? How do we make that easy and quick? And something that we're very grateful to our community for is quite a lot of feedback on this. And something that's been discussed within the community recently is putting together some criteria around what an extra small or an extra large or a small looks like versus what's what's a different t-shirt size or points score. And this is an example that one of our customers came up with as a really easy, quick way to sort of eyeball a new idea, take a look at it and decide if it's something that's pain relief and it's really, really bad, we're probably going to score it as a large. If this is something that is, doesn't really affect a lot of customers, it's barely noticeable, it's probably an extra small. And we've got similar kind of examples here for effort. My personal favorite being lots and lots of technical effort, meaning it's like a Death Star, meaning it's an extra large. So I'd highly advocate talking with your stakeholders at the point where you start to put together these scoring mechanisms, putting together some criteria that everybody's happy with as a group, and then that frees you up as the product manager to look at each idea as it comes in, assign a score based on the criteria you've already agreed, maybe with a bit of input from your technical team if need be. But at the end of the day, you can do the scoring without going to committee for it. Now, what do we have if we bring all of this together? And this is where we start to look at why this blended approach is going to be the best approach for you. What you have if you look at your top-down approach of what is my vision, what are my objectives based on what the company objectives and the product objectives are, what initiative do we think is most important? In this example, it's a homepage redesign. And tie that together with the bottom-up approach, which is where our users have said the navigation's, poor, we need that improving, or it'd be great if the sign-up page was a bit easier to use, or what would be really useful is if you gave us an explainer video on the homepage. By tying in that top-down approach with that bottom-up approach, what we've ended up with is a roadmap card that appeals to all levels of the organisation and tells the story that we want to really tell. And what does that really mean? Why is that a really useful way of putting across our roadmap? Well, first of all, it gives us a flexible roadmap. It means that we're being lean in that we're able to experiment, we're able to look at all the things that may or may not improve our objectives, but we've also got individual small pieces of information that we can provide to our development team that they can build on incrementally, and they can use their agile development processes in order to deliver those changes. It also means that we can change scope. If we've got a roadmap card that's got 4 ideas on it, and we discover halfway through the project that actually one of those is no longer required and we don't need it to solve the problem, we can de-scope the project without actually changing the roadmap card. We're still delivering that homepage redesign. We're still going to improve usability and revenue, but we're not necessarily delivering all the features that we initially said we were. So we're still getting the outcomes that we wanted without worrying about being, to the letter of the law and what we initially said we were going to do. It also means that we can communicate appropriately. And what I mean by that is we can talk to different parts of the organization and different stakeholder groups, both internal and external, in a way that's appropriate for them. Senior stakeholders, investors, execs probably want to know what problems we're going to solve and roughly what we're going to do. We're going to do a homepage redesign, and that will increase, say, user adoption. Whereas if we're talking to the development team or the marketing team who want to know more information and more detail, we've got a roadmap card that tells them what problems we're solving, but not only that, it tells them exactly what we're going to build and what we should be talking about to the market and what we should be looking at from an architecture point of view and a delivery team point of view. So it doesn't matter who we're talking to, we're communicating appropriately. It means that we've got a roadmap aligned with company direction. Rather than just listening to our customers and blindly delivering what they've asked us to deliver, we've listened to our market, we've understood the problems that have been put together out there, but we've also looked at what the company wants to achieve and what the overall objectives are for the company, and we've brought the two together, which means that our roadmap is meeting our customer needs, our market needs, it's solving customer problems, but it is also aligned with what the company wants to achieve. And finally, as I say, probably the most important thing that we can all do is a roadmap, which is like I've walked you through today. At the end of the day, is going to solve customer problems, which is really, as product managers, why we're all here. And with that, I'll pass you back over to Andrea and see if we've got any questions.
We sure do. The first one is, does this road mapping approach support experimentation?
Absolutely, actually. So because we've got these different levels of detail on the roadmap, we can talk about the fact that we're going to do a homepage redesign, but that homepage redesign, we don't necessarily know exactly what that's going to look like. So what we can do is treat each one of those ideas, if you like, that are on that roadmap card. We can treat each one of those an experiment in its own right. We can take the first one, we can deliver it, we can see what people think, we can adapt. Every time we deliver something new, we can change the scope of the project as we go along. So what that means is actually, I think this kind of roadmap that doesn't have timescales marching along the top is actually the only roadmap structure that really does support experimentation.
Which is answering another question. Is how would you handle resource allocation to see if there are enough resources to complete the task?
Yeah, this is a really good one. I think the thing is about resource allocation is that I kind of feel you can only really do it just in time. If you look ahead sort of 12 months, 18 months, 2 years out in advance, there's no way that any company will know exactly how many resources they've got at that point. So what we advocate is using a product roadmap to show what is going to be built and why. And then when you get to the point that you know you're definitely going ahead with that, we would recommend pushing that information into a project management tool or development tool, something like Jira or Pivotal Tracker or Azure DevOps, I think it is now TFS, one of those tools where you can really start to look at exactly what those tickets look like, who's going to be working on them, how long it will take. Having said that, one of the things that I have certainly done in the past is look at the ideas that are on a roadmap card Look at them from the point of view of how much effort is involved, particularly if you look at that from the point of view of story points for each one of those ideas, and at least you can start to estimate in advance how long a project might take. So I think that's the kind of thing that you can do with the initiatives that are in that now column, but certainly things that are far out into the right-hand side of the roadmap that are more aspirational, I wouldn't recommend doing resource planning around those until you've got to the point that you understand them well enough to do it.
Cool. Next question is, how do you support the concept of OKRs with this particular road mapping approach?
Oh, that's fab. Okay, so we have objectives on our roadmap, and these objectives, as we talked about, are our guide rails, which help us to understand what kind of long-term goals we're trying to achieve. Are we trying to improve user adoption? Are we trying to improve, the number of installations of an app, for example? And these are all things that you can measure. And that's where our key results come in. So using this kind of roadmap where you're not just talking about what you're going to build, but why you're going to do it, that why really equates to your OKRs. And these are things that you can measure. It also means that after you've delivered something, you can look at what the objective was. You can go back a month later, 3 months later, 6 months later, and measure the effect of what you've done and really show that the work that was done on the product roadmap fits in with your OKRs and either helps you achieve those key results or maybe it doesn't. And you know what? That's not desirable, but it can be okay because then at that point you're going to go, well, why didn't we get the key results? What can we learn from this? Again, we're going back to the idea of being lean, of experimenting, looking what we learned from the work that we've done, and then feeding that into the next iteration of our product.
Guys, please do continue to put in your questions for Liz or for myself, and we will answer them. We did get a question which I thought was pretty interesting. I did answer it myself, but I don't know if you want to add anything to it, which is in terms of ProdPad, how do you correlate ideas to features or epics? So what is the highest level for an item, and then how does that trickle down into more items?
Okay, so within ProdPad itself, and we're talking functionality here, effectively you can decide how an idea will map to the tickets, if you like, that you've got in your development tool. What we generally find is that an idea is roughly equivalent to an epic. So it's going to be a chunk of functionality that you take on and then break that down into user stories or technical tickets and so on. For that reason, actually, within ProdPad, at the epic level, that's where we'll have the designs, we'll have the functional specs, we'll have the user design, the user interface designs and so on. But we also give you user stories that you can use to really break that epic down into individual pieces of work that can be done and can be pushed over to the development tool. That ties in nicely as well with the fact that the roadmap cards within ProdPad are what we'd call an initiative or a project or a theme. And again, that's something that you might sort of equate to a similar entity, if you like, in one of your development tools. Is that the same as what you said, Andrea?
Pretty much.
Yay!
Yeah, I just think sometimes it's helpful to hear it, not just read it.
Absolutely.
Ryan, who just asked why the roadmap cards in the presentation look different. Ryan, it's a preview of what we're working towards, so don't worry. We are working on a lot of really cool things, so don't worry about it. You will have a very similar view in the coming weeks or months. As you know, we can't really promise release dates, but it is definitely something we are working towards. So don't worry, you will have that very, very, very soon.
And actually, that's an absolute perfect example of where we've taken this philosophy of top down and bottom up and we've brought it into life. So we knew from the things that we wanted to do strategically that we'd like to improve the roadmap view and make that even more usable and useful for our customers. But we also heard from you some of the features that you'd like to see on the roadmap, which we collected as feedback. We turned those into ideas and we tied them in with the theme of roadmap improvements. And that's now actually coming through to our customers as we're slowly but surely improving the roadmap. And as Andrea says, there are a few changes coming through that I know a lot of you'll be seeing very soon.
Cool. We seem to have a bit of a quiet group today. So guys, I don't want to down this conversation if you still have questions. So I'm going to give it a couple minutes and see if any other questions pop up. If not, I think that might be it for us today. But I'm going to keep an eye on the questions and see if anything kind of trickles in last minute, as it sometimes does. If not, thank you guys for joining us today. I know we still have 25 people on the line, so one of you has to have a question.
The only other thing I will say is that the talk that I've done today, we've also written up as a blog post, so you can read this on our blog. Yeah, it'd be really good if, even if we don't get any more questions in this session now, then we're happy to take follow-up questions later on, either via the community or if you just drop us a line.
We are getting questions, and one.
Oh, all of a sudden they want to talk.
Someone would like to know where you're from. I believe it's the accent.
Yeah, probably I get that question a lot. I'm based up in the Midlands in Worcestershire. I have refined my accent so it's not quite so Midlands, but I'm afraid it does still sneak through.
Yes, Brian, we will be sharing the slide deck. We're actually going to be sending a recording of the video probably next week on Monday or Tuesday. We just have to get things together and send things out. So don't worry. Yes, you will have a copy of this. Next question. Oh, now all the questions are coming through. What is the best way to facilitate collection of feedback as a team?
Wow. Okay. So I think it depends on where you're collecting the feedback from. What we tend to say, or what I tend to say when I'm speaking to ProdPad customers, because different methods of collecting feedback, I think you have to think about what channel people are using. If you're collecting feedback via your sales team, you might want to set up one of our integrations with something like Salesforce or Intercom, or one of those tools where your sales team are going to be camped out and speaking to customers. Email's another good one as well. Again, if it's internal members of staff that you're collecting feedback from, we do have a Chrome extension, which actually has just been updated this week so that you can collect feedback via the Chrome extension. So that's a great way to get your stakeholders within the company just quickly typing in a bit of feedback they've heard into that Chrome extension, collecting it within ProdPad and sort of treating it alongside all the other feedback you're getting. We can give you a customer feedback portal that you can put on your website so that customers can feed it directly into your marketing website, or via the widget that you can embed within your own product. And we have a variety of other integrations too. So there's lots and lots of places that you can collect feedback, kind of where your people are already speaking to customers, and then use integrations and other methods to bring that feedback directly into ProdPad so that you can get a handle on it and process it, turn it into ideas and link it in with your roadmap.
We do have a really interesting question, and I think this may lead into a roadmap clinic, but Philippe would like to know what happens or what tips do you have when you present a roadmap that contains 30 to 40 items in the now period? I fear the whole range of data details would be hard to communicate. And I would agree, that's a lot of items to have in the now column. Yeah. I almost want to say, and I don't know if you agree, Liz, that it feels like you're presenting features as opposed to groups of features and projects that
Absolutely.
you can work on.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting that you mention a roadmap clinic, because we do run quite a few roadmap clinics where we'll look at people's roadmaps and help them to improve them. And that's something that we see a lot. We see what I think of as roadmaps being too granular, where it is just feature after feature after feature. And we need to kind of take a step back and think, what kind of themes work well together, and how can we focus on a particular area first before moving on to the next. But yeah, roadmap clinic is definitely a good way to go, and they're easy to book in. There's a link on the bottom of our website, and they're really easy to book in if you want to talk to us kind of one-to-one.
Yep, I am just grabbing that link. If you guys heard me typing, I apologize. I was just looking for the link. Cool. We have a couple more questions about functionality that I've just answered. These are all great questions. If you guys, I don't know if you guys can see the questions tab, but yes, we do have an integration with Azure DevOps. We do not have an integration with Rike at the minute, but we do have an API, so you can always create your own. Is it possible to create more than one roadmap? Yes, absolutely. Not only can you create more than one roadmap, but you can put them together into product lines. Liz, do you want to talk a little bit about product lines and how people can manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for companies where either the product is such a big product that it makes sense to break it down based on who's managing each piece of that product, or maybe if you've just got a bunch of products that kind of fit together nicely in one kind of theme area or one kind of maybe one industry or one market segment, then we have in ProdPad the idea of a product line, and it's effectively a group of products. Now, each product will have its own roadmap. And we tend to think about the way you break that down into who are you presenting that roadmap to, or who's presenting that roadmap. It's usually one product manager to one roadmap. But what we also have is the ability to bring all of those roadmaps together into a view of all the products within a product line or within a group of products, so that if you are responsible for a whole group of products, you could have a roadmap for each one, but you could also show a single roadmap that has all of the details of all the product roadmaps on there as well.
I don't see any more questions like before. I'm going to give it another minute or two and just let people gather their thoughts before we say goodbye for the day. But that's been a lot of really, really great questions. I have tried to answer some of them directly in the chat, you guys, so hopefully all of your questions have been answered. A couple of questions around getting this next week. So don't worry, yes, again, this will be recorded or is being recorded, and we will send it to you so you can always share it. And I don't see any more questions. So, oh, there we go. I've used a few different product management platforms. ProdPad is definitely the simplest to use. Why, thank you, Jason. We think so too. How would you suggest doing about communicating time and schedule to executives who are looking for it? So essentially, how do you communicate a timeline? And I think this is our favorite question ever. And we could probably talk about it for the next hour. So I'm going to let Liz do like a quick 2-minute answer on that, if it's even possible.
Well, I think a lot of the times executives ask to see a timeline, and people will just go ahead and do it, not really questioning why they want to see it. It's very easy to say, yeah, this will be ready in March 2021. But the chances are it's just not going to be, because things change between now and March 2021. We'll learn loads, resources will change, and really it's just not advisable to be planning that far out. I think if you're working on something that's in that now column that you have lots of confidence over, you could put a time period on it, but maybe not a specific date. Overall, I would push back on an executive who asked for timescales and ask them why they want to have a timescale, what they're going to do with that information, and then obviously when they turn back and say they're going to go and do something with that information, maybe just enforce them the fact that, well, actually, because of the way the business is run and because of the way software is developed, the date is not going to be accurate, so it's not something that you'd really want to share. Yeah, so at the end of the day, I think ProdPad as a team, we don't recommend putting dates on roadmaps at all unless you've got massive amounts of confidence around it and you know you're going to be delivering it in the very, very short term.
So just shared a blog post that I actually just wrote a couple of weeks ago about that, so give that a read. TLDR, too long didn't read. If you're not going to read it, remember that a release plan and a product roadmap are two separate documents. So you've got your strategy and you've got your execution. So when it comes to times and schedules, that is execution, and you can't really promise a date if you haven't validated something yet, or you don't know what the scope of that might be. So remember that product and development are two separate things, and therefore require two different documents. Now you can't present both together. Which you should do, I think, have something that outlines your objectives and then something that outlines the actual execution of those objectives. There is a follow-up comment from Jason saying, most often it's because the exec team has forecasted revenue for a fiscal year and its associated product or feature. So that's generally why they want to see time estimates. Do you want to comment on that, Liz?
Yeah, and I think that's all very well, as long as you can prove that you're going to get the outcome. What you can't, so let's talk about outcomes. If we are delivering a homepage redesign, we want the outcome from that to be perhaps improved revenue. But what we can't do is say feature A will be delivered by this, feature B will be delivered by this date, and feature C will be delivered by this date, because you might not need feature C, or feature B might take longer than you thought it would, and so feature C isn't going to get there. I think at the end of the day, the product roadmap should be focused on what the outcome is going to be, i.e., in this case, we're going to have a homepage redesign, and we're going to hopefully reap the rewards of that on the revenue side. But what you can't do is necessarily use that to tell people when it's going to happen. As Andrea said, yes, you need to have a release plan. That's a different discipline. That's really project management rather than product management. If you're a product manager who's wearing both hats, then you need to look at your project management skills and your resource planning skills rather than your strategic product management skills. That's not to say it's not important, it absolutely is, but it's not something that product management as a discipline is really responsible for.
Yep, I would just say remember outcome versus output. So those are two different things. I hope, Jason, that helped. If not, we're more than happy to continue this chat on Twitter. If you guys want to join us on Twitter, we like to talk a lot. So please join us there. With that said, I think we're going to call it a day. Thank you guys so much for being so engaged today. Lots of really cool questions. Jason, yes, we do have something like that. Let me grab that for you. Jason just said it would be very helpful if ProdPad developed a short video to teach executives about the concept you've described. We've got several videos actually. So please, I'm going to put up our YouTube page. Lots of really great webinars. You can find their pre-recorded webinars that we've done in the past. So check us out, youtube.com/ProdPad. Lots of great resources. We talk about this a lot. Also keep an eye on our webinars page at prodpad.com/webinars. We will be having an end of the year webinar with our CEO, Jana Basto. I haven't even announced it yet, but I'm announcing it now. So if you guys want to...
So you have now.
Now, exactly. So if you guys want to hear from Jana, that will be coming up, I want to say the second week of December. December 11, I want to say it out of the top of my head. I don't actually have my calendar in front of me, but yes, it's coming up. And please join us on that. Keep an eye on our webinars page and check out our YouTube channel because we do post everything there. This will be posted there as well next week. So thank you guys for joining us and have a good one.